In our headlines on this Monday, May 4th, here in South Korea, the US is launching an initiative aimed at guiding stranded neutral commercial ships through the Strait of Hormuz as diplomatic efforts to defuse tensions with Iran remain deadlocked. And the US's intentions to reduce its troop presence in Germany trigger talk of a potential similar scenario on the Korean Peninsula, but pundits here downplay such prospects. Meanwhile, on the political front, South Korea's local elections are now 1 month away, and candidates from all parties are pledging to place priority on the needs of the people. A US-led initiative declared by Donald Trump to guide stranded commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz has been disputed by Iran. Our Moon Hen-yeon has the latest.
US President Donald Trump has announced that a US-led operation to escort commercial ships out of the Strait of Hormuz will begin Monday morning Middle East time through what the US is calling Project Freedom. President Trump described the stranded vessels as merely neutral and innocent bystanders. Framing the operation as a humanitarian gesture for crews running low on supplies, he said if in any way this humanitarian process is interfered with, that interference will, unfortunately, have to be dealt with forcefully. The operation challenges Iran's strict limits on maritime traffic, enforced since the start of Operation Epic Fury. In response, the Iranian military issued a statement on Monday where it insisted that all commercial shipping must coordinate with Iranian forces to ensure safe transit. It cautions that any foreign military presence, particularly from the United States, would be attacked if it tried to enter the area. Amid the standoff at sea, diplomatic efforts remain strained. Iran's foreign ministry confirmed it received Washington's response to its 14-point peace proposal via Pakistan and will announce its official stance soon. The proposal demands the withdrawal of US forces from near Iranian borders and an end to the US naval blockade within 30 days, while explicitly ruling out nuclear negotiations. President Trump, however, has signaled he will reject the terms. Trump told Israeli media the proposal is unacceptable, writing in a separate post that he cannot imagine accepting the plan, as Tehran has not yet paid a big enough price for what they have done over the last 47 years. Moon Hen-yeon, Arirang News.
On the broader security front, German Chancellor Friedrich Merz is soft-pedaling the implications of a US troop reduction from Germany, reaffirming instead Berlin's ties with Washington. Our Lee Seung-jae covers his words and more.
German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has sought to play down rising tensions with the United States, emphasizing that Washington remains central to the NATO alliance, despite recent disagreements with President Donald Trump. Speaking in a televised interview with public broadcaster ARD on Sunday, Merz described the U.S. as Germany's most important ally, acknowledging that policy differences are inevitable, but insisting they do not undermine the strength of the transatlantic partnership.
I have to accept that the American president holds a different view on these issues than we do, but that does not alter the fact that I remain convinced the Americans are important partners for us, the most important ones in the North Atlantic Alliance.
His remarks follow Washington's announcement of a troop drawdown in Germany, a move Merz downplayed as neither new nor a major concern. Despite ongoing disagreements over the Iran conflict, he reaffirmed his commitment to continued cooperation with Trump and pledged not to abandon efforts to maintain strong transatlantic ties. The comments come amid a sharp deterioration in relations between the two countries. Trump reacted angrily to Merz's earlier criticism of U.S. strategy in the Iran war, responding with plans to reduce U.S. troop levels in Germany and impose higher tariffs on European Union automobile imports. Meanwhile, global attention is shifting to Yerevan, where world leaders have begun arriving ahead of the 8th summit of the European political community. Held under the theme Building the Future, Unity and Stability in Europe, the meeting brings together leaders from nearly 50 countries, including all 27 European Union member states, at a time of significant geopolitical uncertainty. Key agenda items are expected to include the reduction of U.S. troops in Germany and the broader economic impact of the prolonged U.S.-Iran conflict. Launched in October 2022 following the outbreak of the Ukraine war, the EPC, often described as an EU plus Alpha forum, aims to strengthen political dialogue and cooperation across the European continent with participation at times from 44 countries. 이승재, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, here in South Korea, the Trump administration's intentions to shrink its troop size in Germany have triggered talk about a potential similar scenario on the Korean Peninsula. That being said, our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung reached out to a number of pundits here for their thoughts on such prospects. To take a listen.
With Washington's order to pull out some of its troops from Germany, eyes have been on how this would affect the 28,500 U.S. troops stationed in South Korea, which is the third largest posting after Germany. Experts say the decision regarding Germany could spark a debate over reducing the number of USFK troops, but it will not lead to major or imminent change, as the Korean Peninsula is strategically different from Europe.
North Korea's nuclear and missile threats are immediate and persistent, and any crisis on the peninsula would require a rapid response. For that reason, the possibility of a larger scale reduction of U.S. forces in South Korea in the short term remains relatively very low.
South Korea, unlike U.S. forces in Europe, also has the important mission of countering China. Because of this, any relocation or reduction that doesn't align with strategic goals or efficiency would likely be very difficult.
But pundits do say Seoul should not dismiss the broader implications of the recent decision, which reflects Washington's shift toward greater flexibility and how its assets in Korea will be used.
The more important questions are what missions USFK will perform, how U.S. assets on the peninsula might be used in a regional contingency, and how both allies can prevent any defense gap on the Korean Peninsula if those assets are temporarily redeployed.
As of 2022, most USFK are ground troops, with around 18,000, while the Air Force fields around 8,000. In terms of strategic flexibility, as Trump is considering pushing Seoul to take greater responsibility for deterring Pyongyang and shifting USFK toward a China-focused role, especially in the event of a Taiwan contingency, restructuring could happen.
South Korea is expected to handle most of North Korea's conventional threats, so a large number of U.S. ground troops may not be necessary. As a result, U.S. forces in South Korea could be restructured by reducing Army forces and strengthening air and naval capabilities.
Experts thus advise Seoul to consult closely with Washington over mechanisms for strategic flexibility while ensuring a firm deterrence against Pyongyang. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
And staying with the thoughts of experts here, one author believes South Korea should seek to strengthen its strategic partnership with nations in the Gulf region amid the recent events on the geopolitical front. Our foreign affairs correspondent Oh Soo-young sat down with him.
Korea should expand security cooperation with Gulf nations through middle power partnerships amid growing global uncertainty. That is the view of Choi Chang-un, a former presidential security trainer in the United Arab Emirates, who authored UAE from Desert to Mars and Sense of Security. He says the ongoing Middle East situation is fundamentally changing the region's security dynamics.
First, it has clearly shown that the Strait of Hormuz proved to be a vital choke point for the global economy. Second, by directly striking GCC nations, Iran has in fact drawn them into the conflict. Third, this war has demonstrated who stands as a friend and who stands as adversary. Taken together, these developments have made the regional security environment even more complex.
The shift is already being felt across the Gulf. Countries like the UAE, Saudi Arabia and Qatar have moved to strengthen air defense systems and diversify their security relations. Korea has already built one of its deepest partnerships in the region with the UAE, signing a $20 billion deal to build a Baraka nuclear power plant and exporting the Cheonggung air defense system to the Gulf country.
As this war has shown, South Korea and the UAE are highly complementary partners, each able to offset the other's weaknesses. This may also be the moment to develop Korea-UAE relations further into what might be described as a cognitive alliance.
At the same time, the crisis has brought into focus a longer-term concern over US security commitment. Washington remains engaged, but increasingly stretched from Europe to the Middle East to the Indo-Pacific.
Of course, there are inevitably concerns about US commitment to its allies. In that context, how does that really reshape the strategic considerations for countries like South Korea and the UAE?
GCC countries require a robust air defense system to protect their own infrastructure. This work has shown under real combat conditions the quality and effectiveness of Korean weapon systems. Looking ahead, I also believe that the cooperation in artificial intelligence, built on South Korea's strength in semiconductor manufacturing, could make a meaningful contribution to Korea GCC partners over the next 100 years.
In a more fragmented security environment, Che says those partnerships are no longer secondary. He says Seoul must now move beyond energy ties and take on a larger strategic role in the Gulf region. Oh Si-young, Arirang News.
North Korea, meanwhile, has rebuked Japan's push to revise 3 key security documents, calling the move an open challenge to international peace. In a Nodong Shinmun article published on this Monday, Pyongyang accused Tokyo of seeking to become a war state and a war merchant. The paper took aim at Japan's plans to boost defense spending, ease restrictions on arms exports, and expand offensive military capabilities through revisions of its national security strategy, its national defense strategy, and its defense buildup program within this year. Japan, for its part, has said the revisions are in response to growing regional security concerns, including China's activity in the Pacific. The benchmark KOSPI closed its trade on this Monday at just below 7,000. The index soared over 5% on the back of AI infrastructure, semiconductors and securities to end at 6,936.9. Now, by company, SK Hynix jumped over 12%, and this jump in turn raised its market cap to over 1,000 trillion won for the first time in history. Foreign and institutional investors led Monday's rally. Also, global investment banks have raised their economic growth forecasts for South Korea this year in light of the country's strong first quarter rebound. According to a Bloomberg finding published on this Monday, the average growth outlook based on the projections of 42 major institutions now stands at 2.1%, up 0.1 percentage point on month. This upward revision follows the Bank of Korea's first quarter finding of a 1.7% GDP expansion, the highest in over 5 years, driven by chip exports. On a cautious note, South Korea's inflation is also forecast to rise to hover at around 2.5% this year. In other news, the heirs of corporate giant Samsung have paid the final installment of the largest inheritance tax in South Korea's history. Our Kim Jun-ong has details.
The Samsung family has fully paid off its inheritance tax bill totaling 12 trillion won, or roughly $8 billion. The company announced Sunday that Samsung Electronics chair Lee Jae-yong and other family members settled the bill via 6 installments over the past 5 years. The process began with the tax filing in April 2021 following the death of the late chairman Lee Gun-hee in October 2020. The family used Korea's deferred payment system and, at the time, described paying taxes as a natural duty of citizens, pledging full compliance. The former chief left an estate valued at around $17.6 billion, including shares, property, and art collections. The resulting inheritance tax, estimated at about $8 billion, marks the largest ever seen in Korea's history. The amount exceeds the government's total inheritance tax revenue of about $5.5 billion in 2024 by roughly 50%, making it highly unusual even by global standards. Hong Ra-hee, the widow of the late Lee Gun-hee, is estimated to have paid the largest share at more than $2 billion. Chairman Lee Jae-yong and his sisters, Lee Bu-jin and Lee Se-hyun, are estimated to have each paid in the high $1 billion range. Korea has one of the highest inheritance tax rates in the world, reaching up to 50% for large estates that exceed $2 million. In Samsung's case, an additional 20% surcharge is applied to shares held by controlling shareholders, effectively pushing the total tax burden to around 60% of the estate. Beyond meeting their tax obligations, the family also gave back to the public, including a roughly $600 million medical support fund and donation of more than 23,000 artworks.
This marked an unprecedented transfer of wealth back to society, despite concerns that the heavy tax burden could strain liquidity and complicate control of the business. The process was ultimately handled smoothly, making it a positive outcome overall.
Industry observers say the case could serve as a precedent for succession at other major conglomerates. Kim Jun-ong, Arirang News.
We're now counting down 1 month to the local elections on June 3rd. Pundits believe the event will serve as a major gauge of public sentiment on the state of national affairs, which candidates from all parties are pledging to improve. Our political correspondent An Sung-jin tells us about them.
Korea's first nationwide election since the launch of the Lee Jae-myung administration is entering full campaign mode. Candidate lineups for 60 metropolitan mayoral and gubernatorial races have now been finalized, with just 30 days to go until voters head to the polls. The ruling Democratic Party is aiming for a sweeping victory, hoping to consolidate both central and local power to accelerate its reform agenda and stabilize governance. The main opposition People Power Party faces mounting pressure to deliver meaningful results as it seeks to rebuild after a series of setbacks. The race for Seoul's mayor, one of the country's key battlegrounds, has taken shape as a two-way contest between the DP's candidate Chung Won-ho and the incumbent mayor Oh Se-un of the PPP. Among other things, housing policy is set to be a central campaign issue. Chung is focusing on delivering tangible results for housing, while also emphasizing labor reforms, including flexible work arrangements and measures to address job displacement driven by AI and climate change. Oh promotes a rapid integrated planning initiative aimed at fast-track redevelopment and reconstruction projects by easing loan regulations to revive housing supply. For this local election, the traditional conservative Gyeongsang-do region is also a major battleground, with the ruling party fielding high-profile candidates to defend its strongholds, while the opposition seeks to make inroads. The DP candidates are presenting a broad regional development blueprint, notably a megacity initiative, aimed at reshaping the area into key national growth hubs for logistics and innovation. Meanwhile, the PPP is also pushing for a regional blueprint through legislation, which lays the groundwork for administrative unification within the region, for expanded local autonomy and fiscal decentralization. At the same time, by-elections for 14 National Assembly seats will be held alongside the local polls, many triggered by resignations involving lawmakers, adding another layer of political stakes. With polls so far suggesting the ruling party has the edge, attention is now turning to whether that lead will hold. As the full-scale campaign begins, the stage has been set for a high-stakes showdown that will ultimately be decided by voters in just 1 month. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
This is The World Now, bringing you everything you need to know from around the globe. 3 people have died and at least 3 others have fallen ill after a Hantavirus outbreak on a cruise ship sailing in the Atlantic Ocean. The World Health Organization said on Sunday that at least 1 case has been confirmed by laboratory tests. 1 patient is in intensive care in a South African hospital. Hantavirus has no specific treatment or cure. It spreads through contact with infected rodent droppings and can lead to severe respiratory illness. Israel has committed to a major deal to buy 2 new squadrons of advanced fighter jets from American defense contractors Lockheed Martin and Boeing. The $119 billion acquisition approved on Sunday covers a 4th F-35 squadron and a 2nd batch of F-15IA jets. Officials said the 2-month conflict with Iran made it clear that maintaining a technological edge in the air was not optional. Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said, quote, "Israel is stronger than ever, and Israel must always be stronger than our enemies." In the U.S., Spirit Airlines shut down all operations on Saturday. It becomes the first airline to collapse as a direct consequence of the Iran war after jet fuel costs doubled in 2 months. Spirit had planned around fuel costs of around $2.20 a gallon, but by the end of April, those costs had reached $4.50, making survival without fresh financing impossible. The Trump administration offered $500 million to keep the carrier alive in exchange for a 90% equity stake, but creditors rejected the deal. Spirit accounted for roughly 5% of all U.S. domestic flights at its peak. All flights have been canceled, with most customers refunded on Saturday. In India, a temple elephant broke free of its chains on Friday and went on a 2-hour rampage, killing one man, injuring others, and flipping a car using its tusks. The victim had driven the elephant to the Kidanguru Mahabhishnu temple in the southern Indian state of Kerala for a religious celebration. He was trampled after stopping to photograph an injury on the animal's tusks. The elephant remained beside his body for an extended period, preventing anyone from approaching. Police, wildlife officials, and an elephant squad eventually subdued the animal with tranquilizer darts. Chu Ji-han, Arirang News.
Tomorrow on Children's Day, we will see clear skies across the country. However, there will be big day-to-night temperature swings, especially in inland areas, with differences of around 15 degrees Celsius. UV levels will be very high nationwide, and ozone concentrations are also expected to rise, so extra caution is needed if you plan to spend extended time outdoors. Meanwhile, rough seas advisories are in effect for offshore areas of the southern and central East Sea. These advisories will be lifted later this afternoon or early tomorrow morning. As for air quality, fine dust levels will range from good to moderate nationwide, making it a great day for outdoor activities. Tomorrow, Seoul will start the day at 8 degrees Celsius, Chuncheon at 5 degrees, Daejeon at 8 degrees. Then by the afternoon, Seoul will get up to 22 degrees, Daegu at 23 degrees, Jeju at 19 degrees. Looking ahead, on Thursday, rain is expected in parts of Gyeonggi-do and western Gangwon-do provinces from the morning into the afternoon. Now here's a look at the weather around the world.
Those are the headlines at the SAR here in South Korea. Coming up right after this break is our daily panel session, so do stay with us and thank you for now.